It is star time. I guess it was about a year ago that a track started creeping into our consciousness that from first listen to almost everybody knew that it was going to be the record of the year, record of the summer, record of records. And that was confirmed a few months later at the Grammys when Get Lucky by Daft Punk earned the biggest honor of the year when it was, in fact, named Record of the Year. It was, well, do I have to tell you how magnificent that record was? Just brilliant. And it was anchored by the rhythm set by our next guest, Nile Rodgers, who has been making hits for decades. And, but he calls himself, he himself calls Get Lucky the most significant song of his career. Another person involved in the same Daft Punk album was the man that we've asked to conduct the interview. In his role as president and chairman of ASCAP, he's become an annual visitor to our annual get-together. But it's not that role that has people on the streets of Toronto asking him to have their picture taken with him. He's been a star on screen since he played a teenage rocket scientist in The Loved One. And I've never really forgiven him for doing what he did to poor Winslow Leach as Swan in Phantom of the Paradise, which is, I swear to God, that movie made my teenage years bearable. I'm a weird dude. Anyway, he's one of the world's most successful songwriters with Grammys and Oscars to prove it. Please welcome two great favorites of CMW, Paul Williams and Nile Rodgers.
Big surprise of the night was you were a gift for my 12th birthday, because when the day I turned 12, you were born. We share the same birthday, September 19th. No, September 19th, 1940 and 1952. Wow. You know, so as Songs from the Edge of Geezer, I turn to you and say it's a great honor to be at this point in my life to finally share a little time on vinyl and zeros and ones with you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And believe me, the feeling is mutual. So you'll see as this goes on.
Yeah. Well, it's great. It's a channel. First of all, I said to Nile backstage, I said that there's a part of his career that is going to be a little dim for me. I certainly remember the music, but I don't know where the hell I heard it. Because you know you're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade, and the 80s were gone for me. So as I was looking at your bio today and everything, I saw it's interesting that through the haze of the 80s for me, because I'm 24 years sober, but through the haze of the 80s for me, your wonderful music does stand out, and it lives on, and it's full of, this room is full of people, this world is full of people, that dance to your brilliant music, fell in love to it. I'd like to go back a little bit before that and talk about you talk about growing up in a house full of jazz.
Yeah, that's my background. Well, I started with classical music when I first started playing, so I was, playing orchestral, I was playing woodwinds. But then the 60s happened, and I met this guy named Timothy Leary, which was really funny. So I had no idea who he was. I certainly had no idea what LSD was. And I went up to the Hollywood Hills, and these people asked me if I wanted to take a trip. And I thought that I had just taken a trip, because I was someplace before, and the next thing I wound up someplace else. To me, that's taking a trip. Anyway, so I got there. Somehow I ingested LSD. I don't know whether it was blotter or sugar cube, whatever it was, because we didn't know what we were doing. And at the end of that encounter, I went home. I was 14 years old, and I went home to my grandmother, and I started singing, "This is the end, beautiful friend, the end of everything that stands." And she was like, "What?" Because prior to that, I was, listening to "Don't Mess with Bill," no, 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 and all this Motown stuff. And I come home and I'm transformed into this wacky hippie guy. And I picked up guitar and I never looked back.
Well, the guitar, there's also another element in you picking up a guitar, and I believe that involves a young lady.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, what happened was when I picked up that guitar after listening to the Doors' first album, I was basically just sort of plunking around with bass lines and stuff like that, doing whatever I could. And I didn't have actually that much time in Los Angeles after that Timothy Leary encounter until I wound up moving back to New York. So when I got to New York, this girl who had a band, and she was just drop dead gorgeous, way out of my league, said, I'm forming a band and we need a guitar player. Because I was so proficient in classical music, I just assumed that I could probably pick this thing up and figure it out in a matter of days or so. And I picked up the guitar that she had and tuned it the way that I had tuned it in LA to play bass lines to, Mission Impossible or Wild Thing or something. And it was horrible, and she made fun of me. Probably wasn't that bad, but I took it very personally, and I looked at that as a big challenge. And believe it or not, about 2.5 years after that embarrassing moment, I was a professional guitar player working with Sesame Street and gigging and getting a paycheck every week and all that sort of thing.
You started out with working with little felt creatures. I wound up spending a large part of my life working with those little felt creatures. It's interesting because I look at the amazing collection of artists that you've worked with, and the body of work, starting back with Sister Sledge, the work you did with Chic, just a phenomenal, just a discography that is just totally intimidating. It's amazing. One of the things that I think I'd love to talk about, obviously about some of these specific records and all, but I have to get the feeling this is an audience full of people who are probably dealing with some frustration right now, and we're dealing with bumping up against obstacles and the like, trying to get their career going and all. I know that most of the great things that happened in my career were because of some other, what I perceived as a failure. I tried to be an actor, I wanted to be an actor. I looked like, I was a kid, I played kids. I looked like a kid till you put me next to a real kid, then I looked like a kid with a hangover, it was like, so it was hard for me. So I didn't get the career that I wanted as an actor, but I was so depressed, I picked up a guitar and I started putting these feelings of rejection into the songs, and I started creating what I call codependent anthems, but it's what I write. And it led to my success. How much of your success has rolled out of your A, not getting what you wanted, or B, just being bumped and no as a navigational nudge? Have you experienced that?
It's the interesting thing about being a composer is I remember a few months ago, I'm gonna sort of sidebar here, but a few months ago I was at a benefit and Harry Belafonte said that artists are the gatekeepers of truth. And I was like going, whoa, yo, Harry, back the fuck off. I'm just writing pop songs. But what Harry meant was absolutely, this is where you're coming from, man. What happened, and what I wound up realizing is that every song I've ever written in my life, every one, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, is actually nonfiction. It's about some realistic thing. You, in your case, when I was younger, I was in an R&B band, and we used to do We've Only Just Begun, and we used to do our own version of it, and we'd go, we only have a kiss for luck, and we're all pop, that sort of thing.
Thank you, I have been paid for the night. I am,
and we had a whole thing, and I remember thinking about lyrics and songs, and when you think about this whole artistic way that we describe life. So we're frustrated, we're hopeful, we talk about all of this stuff that sometimes we can be reporters and we're sort of chronicling, but most of the time we're dreaming. We're like imagining, when you wrote White Lace, like White Lace and Promises, a kiss for luck and we're on our way. God damn! That to me, that is so romantic, it's so visionary, and everything in my life was always like that. It was always about something real that hadn't been actualized, but I was hoping to make it happen just through the song, just through telling the story. Yeah.
I think you're taught the word that covers what we're talking about is authenticity, and one of the now my side of the story is you produced the Let's Dance album for David Bowie. All I want, a brilliant album, and it would just great music. And when I started out, when I was writing songs for, Three Dog Night and the Carpenters, the fact is, even before that, I wanted to be David Bowie. It was already taken, and I thought, I'm an edgy kind of a street dude. I looked like Haley Mills, but I was like, oh, it would be this, and I wanted a David Bowie record. And I remember that Biff Rose and I wrote a song. And Biff Rose went to A&M Records and made a deal, and I went over and met with them as well, and they published it. And the first record they got for us was a song that was recorded by Tiny Tim. And I go, I don't want to be on that. But incidentally, I fell in love with what Tiny Tim did with the song and all. He was an amazing, amazing man. But I thought, this is not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to write for David Bowie. I want to write for David Bowie. But Tiny records this song, and it's the B-side of Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And years later, on the Hunky Dory album, David Bowie records a song. It's the first outside song he ever covered, called "Fill Your Heart." Yeah. So all of a sudden, I've got a David Bowie cut. The reason to even share the story is that it comes right back to authenticity. The fact is, by me, and I fought it at every step, but by doing what was natural for Biff and I, instead of chasing David Bowie, if it was in my heart and if it was right for David Bowie, it would make it to him. So,
and also the thing is that you must, you don't need to take my advice, but the way that I've always looked at it, Paul, is that I love doing it. So I learned to embrace the frustration at an early age, because one of my early music teachers told me the only definition of discipline that I need to remember is the ability to delay gratification. And I went, what do you mean? He says, well, why are you studying with me? I said, because I want to do concerts and I want to make records and I want to be at Shea Stadium and all that kind of stuff like the Beatles. And he says, no, is that all you want? You can do that. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you can do that. I said, great. How? He said, be better.
Be Nile Rodgers.
Be better. You just aren't good enough to do it now. Yeah. But if you learn to be frustrated and you learn to love the fact that you're screwing up and that one day you're probably going to learn how to get it right, it's fine, because practicing, just going do is fun if you love doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in not chasing things but letting them come to you. Because they asked Sammy Cahn, the legendary lyricist, what comes first, the words or the music? And Sammy Cahn said, what comes first is the phone call. Right. So, I look at from Sister Sledge through Diana Ross, all the way up to Daft Punk, all the people you've worked with and all. Part of your success has to be a certain level, some innate ability to collaborate, to come up against what is essentially genius. And not feel like you need to respond to that with ego, where you're showing them that I'm just as good as you are, but where you can really be a receptor to what's going on with them and all. Would you talk a little bit about the collaborative process?
Every single thing I've ever done in my life, unless it's in my bedroom by myself.
Well, let's not go there, because we have a family show here.
And even then, that's a collaboration sometimes. But yeah. You say, yo, do you agree? Yeah. But everything I've done is a collaboration. Whenever I'm composing, if I'm doing the orchestration or whatever, I'm in a room full of string players or woodwind players or brass players, whatever it is, they're now interpreting what I put on the paper. But I don't know any time in my life, except for one song called I Want Your Love, that what I wrote that day, or the night before, or the month before, the week before, actually wound up being the song. It was just a thumbnail that I thought was cool until I heard people play it back, and I went, okay, well, that mistake you made, or that part there, why don't you move it to this? So the truth is that I always believe that I am a collaborator. Nothing that I write, I feel, is sacred. It's sacred on some level as a thought, but it's not sacred like, well, man, if you don't do this, we ain't doing it. When I first met Madonna, the very first real serious meeting, she came to my house and she played these demos for me. And at the end of the meeting, she looked at me and says, if you don't love all these songs, we can't work together. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, really? And I answered her with, well, I'll be honest with you, I don't love all these songs, But I'll tell you this, by the time we finish with this shit, I'm gonna love every one of them, and so will you. So, because the whole point is that we're gonna collaborate and we're gonna fix it and make it so that we both love it. We don't need to love it now, but when we finish, we will love it.
It's I've written a book with my friend Tracy Jackson called Gratitude and Trust, because those are the two twin rails that my life runs on. I'm grateful for the life I've had. I trust that I'll have what I need in the future, but I have to stay right here in this perfect now. And there's a certain flexibility to just not being done. A song's finished for me when it's too late to change it. When it's too late to change your whole and I'm skipping way ahead here now, but I've heard you talk a little bit about we both had the most amazing gift. You made your first record with Daft Punk 17 years ago, I think.
No,
This was
they made their first record with me.
they made yeah.
17 years ago.
Well, we play with the language, but the fact is you were a gift to their lives the first time 17 years ago. They were a gift to mine this last year and all. But in talking about the way you work with them, and I think maybe it's probably a large part of what I wonder if your gift or your ability as an engineer, and a musician, remixing and mixing records and all, has an effect on the way you approach an initial recording session, because you deconstruct. The way you begin is to deconstruct what's already been done many times.
Yeah, I look at myself as a composer. And when I got my first job that was really sort of paying money, other than Sesame Street, I had read this interview with Burt Bacharach, and he called himself an arranger. And I was like going, wow, that's really what I do. I arrange. I take the thing that you wrote and then rewrite it. And in the old days, we got paid for doing that. Today, if you look at the credits on records now, I get the co-writing credit. But in the old days, a person could just sit down sit down and write a simple melody, dun, 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 and they were the writer, but then you come and do all the orchestration, changing around, and do all the production, and then I just get a little bit of money, and the other person went dun, 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 they get the lion's share. Yeah. So I became an arranger, a rewriter, a producer or whatever, and I always looked at that job as I always use this quote from Ben-Hur, where he was a slave on the ship, and he was number 41, and the commander comes in and says, "Row well and live." And that was always my thing. Like, I row well and live. I live to serve the ship. So when I get that phone call and you hire me, my job is to make your record better. Because if I can't do anything to make your record better, why are you calling me? You don't need me. If it's already right, who needs me? Just so I always say, there must be something I can do to help you make your record better. And so I always feel that I'm subordinate to the project. I always work for you, even though I'm working with you.
And a great trick is a great tip, which I can hear now and I need to do better, is to walk into a writing session and save your ideas, hear what's in the room first.
Absolutely.
Because I can walk into it, it's like every now and then I'll write something that's kind of clever, and I'll walk into a room and go and throw out an idea, and we start chasing that, and then I'll leave and I'll think, God, I wonder what would have happened if you'd kept your mouth shut, Paulie. If you kept your mouth shut and said, what are you hearing, Kenny Ashford or whoever I was writing with, And the great experience with Daft Punk was the fact that, that they didn't bring us in for wallpaper. They brought us in, to figure out where the house was going to go, what the house was going to look like. When I was working, one of my first experiences, my second experience with Jim Henson was the Muppet movie. And Kenny Ashford and I met with Jim Henson, and we sat there kind of laid out what the story was going to be about and all, and I walking Jim to the car, I said to Jim, we won't surprise you with these songs. We're going to let you hear what we're doing along the way. And he said something that is a treasure to me, is he said, Paulie, that's not necessary. We'll hear them in the studio when it's time to record. And I went, really? I mean, I just come off of Stars Born, and I'd had a very different experience with Miss Streisand, that was kind of let's keep our, what's going on here. Also a wonderful experience, but a totally different way of, I see that now, a very different way to work. But that kind of trust, is something we don't always find in the economics of the business that we're dealing with. Want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have been so fortunate in that almost every single thing that I've done, I'm really not being egotistical, I'm being statistical, I'm not bragging. I've done like hundreds of recordings. A couple of weeks ago, the guy at Sony, who's now handling my stuff, he said to me, he says, "Oh, hey Nile, I'm the new guy assigned to your publishing and I want to do this." And he says, "I'm at 400 recordings and I'm merely starting to scratch the surface." And I went, holy shit, I've done that many records? So the truth is that I have been so fortunate that when I'm not just doing session work or playing on a person's record, all the records I get hired to make, I actually don't write until I get the job. I don't have a bunch of songs sitting around, so I do everything to order. I've been lucky enough to get hired as a composer and the person who can conceptualize and create the work. Like Diana Ross never heard I'm Coming Out until she walked into the studio and sang it. Sister Sledge never heard We Are Family until they walked into the studio to sing it. So I get to conceive it, lay it out, and go, so here's what your record's gonna sound like. Here you go. And almost every time, no matter how much we fight, because you know this is always the fight, there's always, people disagree. It doesn't sound like what's happening now. But because I am concerned about my artist, I'm always looking down the road, because if you're a composer or you're just working for the record company or the artist, you don't know when the record's going to get scheduled. You don't know who else is coming out with another hit record. You don't know any of that stuff. So I always try and compose with this future in mind that I don't know anything about. I just make up the future and just write that song and say, well, whenever this comes out, I hope people are down with this concept. And that's just what I've always done.
You talked about bass line a little bit earlier. One of the things I made a note to myself, because there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention, is like, okay, Good Times becomes Sugar Hill Gang's A Rapper's Delight, because they got a little bit of a remix there.
Stuff too.
And then the bass line becomes Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. How you were a participant and up at the headwaters of where the whole music world begins to shift. All of a sudden, hip hop is rolling in. All of a sudden, there's a major change in the way record making records are being rap is being born. All this is happening. You never dug in your heels and said, "Wait a minute, I ain't going to change." Want to talk about flexibility a little?
Okay, so even though I'm flexible and open-minded and the whole bit, because I lived in New York City and hip-hop was so culturally strong, I looked at myself as a hippie. And every generation we have this group of people that we identify with. My parents were beatniks. I became a hippie. I was wrapped up in the political 60s. I was a Black Panther. When the hip-hop movement came in, it was talking about culture in a different way. So I felt that I would be perpetrating, as they would say, if I tried to overly identify with it. And the fact is that because people adopted my music, matter of fact, one of the earliest people that I befriended, they told me that the definition of hip hop was they took something hip and they hopped on it. They took something that they already loved and then they made it better. They did something to it. So it was like collage art. So it was like there was this wonderful art and then they added to it and put it together and made it better. So I thought that I didn't do that. I'm the type of person that I start from nothing and create. And as much as I loved hip hop, I can't tell you how many records I wanted to make, and I dabbled a little bit, but it just felt that it was so clearly identifiable with a certain culture, and I couldn't be honest about that because I came from a background in New York City where we had standardized education. I learned to read music very young. I remember Hank Shockley pulled me aside from Public Enemy, the producer of Public Enemy, and he said to me one day something that blew my mind. He said, "Nile, don't you think that if they taught music in school to us like they taught it to you, don't you think we'd rather be doing that? He said, we do this because this is what we have available to us, and because we are artistic people, naturally, we are artists, we are going to make the best music and the best art we can with the tools that are available. And I sat there and I looked at him, because I loved Public Enemy, and I tried to figure out, how did you come up with those compound sounds and those mixture of samples and all of these things that, in my mind, traditionally wouldn't go together, but when you hear it on a Public Enemy track and you hear these compound loops and it's making this overall groove, and I'm like, damn, how'd you guys do that? And then he explained it to me that they're taking all of these elements in the universe that exist that they love, and they make them work. They just can make them work, and I was like,
now it's you come into an area where, as president, as a songwriter who is a member of ASCAP, I think about the remix, all the, sampling and all that, which incidentally, I love the creative spirit that sparks that. I've had some interesting, Dizzy Rascal and Lily Allen, people that have taken bits and pieces of my songs, and my songs are not what you generally turn to for a remix and a rap and everything. I mean, I read Soul on Ice, I know, I've read Bobby Seale's history. I was in a Melvin Van Peebles movie, but when I sit down and write something, it sounds like it was written by a kid from Nebraska. I know. We each have our own authenticity, But I think there's an interesting time right now where we're seeing that creative spirit to take it to the next step. And what I don't want to see in that next step is the loss of that element of ownership for the people that create the music, where they can continue to put food on the table for their kids. Mm-hmm. Because what you do as creators is yours. It is that spark of genius that passes through you. You take a piece of yourself that is absolutely you, and you lay it on the table for the world to relate to. And some guy winds up dancing with his daughter at a dance at their wedding. This is an incredibly lovely, lovely gift that we're offering the world, but the chance to write a second song depends on being able to make a living with that song. And also, I hope that all the remixing, all the sampling continues, thrives, and everything. We have to find a way to do it where the songwriter is not left, and the music creator and the brilliance of minds like this get a chance to develop. The future Nile Rodgers of the world have a chance to make a living at it. They can keep making music if they can make a living at it. It's key.
Well, one thing I want to say, because I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. When you would write the songs that you were writing, and my old R&B bands would cover the Carpenters, which if you looked at the way we dressed and where we were coming from, nothing could be further from you. The Carpenters were like there, and we're like from the hood.
I was in the alley because I was still using
No, but I just want to tell you, we were doing our own version of sampling. We were reinterpreting beautiful, clever, wonderful music that touched us in our hearts. If you saw us performing, like I said, I mean, our shit was happening. We had it all syncopated. I remember when we used to play, when we got to that lyric and we go, a kiss for luck, we go, and that shit was like, a kiss for luck, and we're all.
Well, I know some of the movies because I toured with Gladys Knight and the Pips. They made me an honorary Pipsqueak so I could do the hand catch, the butterfly.
No, but the truth is that as when Harry Belafonte said that artists are the gatekeepers of truth, the truth that you were talking about, that reality meant the same. Maybe it wouldn't be the same, but it was just as artistic to us in the hood, the same way Public Enemy would take Good Times or whatever, or any of our songs, or Grandmaster Flash would take some of our stuff. Matter of fact, Hank Shopley said to me one day, he says, why do you think that we sample so many of your records and so many disco records? Because before hip-hop, that's what we were listening to. Disco was the music we listened to. And so before we had our own bands and before we could compose our own music, your music and other composers were the music we were listening to. So we would just reinterpret it to fit our lifestyle and to fit our culture. But it was the same thing. So as technology improved, they were able to take it and put it on sample pads and beats and blah, blah, blah. But it's still artistically the same thing, is that if we're telling the truth, like I said, I write nonfiction, even if it's something that sounds stupid like The Freak or I'll Freak Out. Trust me, that's a real song about a real event. If you speak the truth, people will ultimately feel your reality. And that's what I've always believed in.
Because they feel the same things. The amazing thing is when I say something from in here, it's absolutely true about what I'm going through, and I play it for somebody, and I see a young lady do this. She's not saying like this to get a better look at me because she wants to take me home. She's doing like this because she's going, I feel that too.
I feel it.
It's that thing that our heads do. I mean, dogs do it, animals do it. It's a fascination thing where it's like, okay, you touched it in me.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm hearing you say something I feel, and there's I wrote a song for a Three Dog Night called Family Man. That's that moment when I feel, thank you. You're the one who bought it. Thank you. But Jack Conrad and I wrote that for Family Man or for Three Dog Night. But that moment of connectedness. Let me talk about connectedness to you and two, I think, great loves of your life. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Bernard, and I want to ask you about that guitar. That guitar that has been one of the longest lasting relationships of your life. Would you care to speak about those two love affairs?
I'll talk about it quickly because we have so many people I would love to hear where they're coming from. But anyway, so Bernard Edwards, my former partner, the bass player and genius, with my band Chic. When Bernard and I first started working together, I was this super serious jazz guy. I was a hippie jazz dude, the flower embroidered pants and, that sort of thing. Like, yeah, man, used to play with my back to the audience because I was really too embarrassed to look at people. And maybe in a way I thought it was too cool. But Bernard kept trying to transform me into the funk guitar player because I had such an extensive knowledge of jazz harmony. He kept imagining, what would that sound like if this dude, it's the same thing we do, we get our computers, wow, what would it sound like if this, so he would always think to himself, what the hell would this guy sound like if he started playing funk? Because everything I did was all jazzy and cool. And so we did a gig in Miami Beach, and the group that was opening for us, and we were actually on tour with the Jackson 5, but we didn't do every day. So one day we did a gig on our own, and the group that was opening for us, they didn't have enough time to strike a stage. So this guy plugged into my amplifier, and we wanted to be like Sly and the Family Stone, so we had all these acoustic amplifiers and they all matched and stuff. But meanwhile, I'm playing the jazz guitars. I can't play it that loud, so it looked cool, but it sounded sort of just okay. This kid plugged into my amp, and he sounded so funky, and all I could see was Bernard's eyes burning into my head. Like, you stupid, that's what I've been trying to tell you all this time. Because this kid is playing my gear and killing. He's like funky, and I'm like, and I'm like looking at him. And that day, I went out to a pawn shop, and because I idolized Hendrix, even though I didn't play that style, I went out and I bought this guitar, a Stratocaster, that to me looked like Hendrix. I didn't know enough about solid body guitars because I was a jazz guy. But to me, it looked like Hendrix and it was cheap. So I bought the cheapest Stratocaster I could find, but it wasn't white. And so I got it and refinished it and put this white antique finish on it so it looked like Hendrix. And I took this guitar back to my hotel room and I just sat in the bathroom and practiced. In those days, we had to share rooms, right? So I had a roommate, and my roommate was the drummer, and he was very good looking, so every night he had like a parade of girls coming in and out of the room. And I'd be in the bathroom just going like, while they're out there going. That feels good. And so they're out in the room doing their thing, and I'm in the bathroom. And I did this for a couple of weeks. And
well, I have to interrupt. That's, in fact, what you described as what your music did all over the world. You went chicka, 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 and people were all over the world doing exactly what you're talking about.
And after a couple of weeks, I emerged as this guy that Bernard Edwards was trying to invent. At that time, the only records that I had written for Chic were pretty jazzy. And we weren't even Chic then. We were a group called the Big Apple Band. And I went to my teacher after buying this Stratocaster. It's a long story. But anyway, my teacher berated me because I was like, putting down pop songs. And I specifically put down this pop song that went, Sugar, sugar, do, 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 do. Oh, honey, honey, do
Jeff
you
Berry.
like- Yeah, and then my
You are my candy
girl. And then my teacher says, I said, yeah, I got to play this boogaloo gig and I'm playing all this bullshit. He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I got to play these pop tunes that I can't get into. Anyway, long story short, I now have this solid body guitar. I've practiced all this stuff. And my teacher tells me that any song that sells 1 million copies is amazing and it's a brilliant composition no matter what it is. And I'll never forget this until I die. And I said, well, why is that? He says, because it has the power to communicate to 1 million strangers. And I went, wow, really? He said, 1 million strangers. So are those 1 million strangers dumber than you, Mr. Jazz Man? And I was like, wow, because my guitar player was a total jazz guy. He wouldn't buy a Stratocaster or anything like that. So 2 weeks later, I wrote my first song for Chic, which was a hit. It was called Everybody Dance, Do-do-do-do, Clap Your Hands. After being Mr. Heavy Jazz guy, I write, Everybody Dance, Do-do-do-do, Clap Your Hands. And Bernard looks at me, and it's the first time I've ever written a song like this, and Bernard looked at me, this was a great moment. He says, my man, I'm really digging this. I hope you guys don't mind me using profanity because I do it a lot, unfortunately, sometimes. He says, my man, I really dig this, but what the fuck does doo-doo-doo-doo mean? And I got really defensive. And I says, it means the same thing as la 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 la. He says, well, why don't we go everybody dance, la 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 la, clap your hands. And I said, because the la la era is over. The doo-doo era is happening. Let's go. This is the doo-doo era. Do-do-do-do, every song is going Soul Train. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, fly, Robin, fly. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do, everything is going do-do-do. You know, no one's going la, la, la. You know, maybe Jay Giles, la, 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 but we sold more records. So anyway, we went to the do-do era, and that was the very first song that I had written. But what happened is, in retrospect, I realized that that's what Bernard was trying to change me into, and I sort of went kicking and screaming, and it was these little nuggets of gold that were just being placed in front of me. My teacher, Bernard, the kid at the gig, playing better than me, sounding better than me on my own gear. All of those little things, I followed those pebbles, those pieces of gold, and next thing I know, as my teacher used to say, you have to mine an ounce. He says you have to mine a ton of ore to get an ounce of gold.
Yeah. So those were little navigational nudges. Yeah. Come this way, and all.
And I
love your idea of opening up for questions as well. So should we do that?
Yeah, we have so many people. I'd love to hear.
I can't really see.
Do we have a mic for people, or do we have to run out there?
Yeah, can somebody out there pick the people and hand them a mic, because I can't see that well.
Yeah, so they don't hate us.
Or hear that well, but other than that, I'm charmed.
Okay.
What's up? My name is I'm a songwriter, a singer, and a recording artist. And I read your book, awesome book. And
Thank you.
There's one of the things that stood out the most was how you were saying you had to use anonymity to get people to take your music in. For example, like you'd go to record labels, and once they saw you, they loved the music. Once they saw you, they didn't want to pursue it further.
Okay, yeah. That's because my first band, yeah, I think I know where he's coming from. See, my first band, which was competitive to me, was a rock and roll band. And we were a black rock and roll band. And in those days, before Living Color and all that stuff, so nobody would sign us, even though every single record company kept our tapes and they really liked us. Because there was a band at the time called Journey, and they had this soulful lead singer in Journey, and our lead singer had just finished in Jesus Christ Superstar. But they didn't know he was black, so they imagined as this white guy who can sing like that, who sounded like Steve from Journey, and they played like us. They were like, whoa, we gotta sign these guys, and we get there, and we're all black, except our keyboard player, who was Puerto Rican, who to them looked white, and they would direct all the questions to him. So, how long have you guys been together? He looked at them, hey, it's their band. I don't know, I just got here. Exactly.
So the question I have is, here in Canada, I think we're a little behind in regards to like diversity. And I'll give you a quick story. Like I was with an influential person in the music industry in Canada, and I played one of my songs, and I play guitar as well. I play acoustic guitar. And when I was done, he said, "I love your voice, man. I love the song, but it's not black music, right?" And I guess what kind of advice could you give? Because I find that happens a lot. They'll see the image, and then I don't rap, I don't do R&B. What kind of advice would you give to someone in Canada in this climate?
Okay, so here's the deal. I always hate to give advice because there's no set formula for the way things work. As Paul said, he became who he became because he was trying to do something else. But one thing I will say is, please be who you are or who you want to be, and don't worry, that thing changes over time. You know, I became this funky guy after thinking I was Mr. Jazz Killer. You know, the thing that motivates us is waking up in the morning and playing that stuff. And if we like it to ourselves, hopefully, if we like it ourselves, hopefully we do the right thing and others like it too. But I always say, man, please learn to embrace the failure. Learn to love playing all by yourself, sitting in a room, laughing and making yourself happy, because that's probably the best thing that's ever going to happen, because most records, if you just look at it statistically, most records never even recoup, let alone become hits, let alone go #1. So when you see a couple of guys like us who had #1 records, we are the exception, not the rule. But I would have kept doing it even if I had all those failures my whole life. I'd still be sitting at home going doo-doo-doo-doo or something else. So, you know, the thing is that I'm trying to tell you that if you're in it just for the fame and the glory and trying to make it, like, and all that sort of stuff, maybe that's cool and maybe that's good enough inspiration and maybe that's an admirable approach to it. You know, that's cool. But for me, I just loved gigging. I would work for $5 or $10. As a matter of fact, now I always say, we work for free. We get paid to travel and eat bad food. Seriously, I do the gig. I walk out in front of this people. I'm thrilled to go out in front of 50,000 people and play Wembley. But boy, getting there through the mud and the travel, you know, yeah. Pay me for that.
Who else we got?
Hi, I'm Marla.
Hey, Marla.
You're a jazz guy. I'm an opera girl.
Love it.
But my other voice is like Karen Carpenter if she had a booty. So like I'm moving towards like soul, like Erykah Badu. That's kind of where we're going. That's how it's moving. How do you trust as you evolve? Because you have that part of yourself that you love and that stuff that's really maybe a little bit pretentious, but you like love it. How do you trust the process? You know, and trust the process that as you evolve and you're kind of letting certain things go, how do you trust without fear? Like, how do you let go of that?
Well, I would say that, you know, that I try things that don't work and I abandon them. If they keep nibbling on you, if the rats keep chewing on the wires up there, I kind of return to it. The other thing that happens a lot is I try to, you know, I think my way through the path that I think I'm going to take, and then my heart takes me to the places that I'm going to wind up really where I really belong. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I get up in the morning and I have 2 prayers. I say, surprise me, God. You know, I tell the big amigo, here are the reins of the day. They're all yours. And the other one is lead me where you need me. If you find yourself going towards those places where people enjoy what you're doing and you get a confidence around what's coming out of you, what's passing through you, I have a feeling that will build for you, that will, and what, you know, I also believe that we are a small participant in this journey. That, you know, as I look back and try to you know, connect the dots to how I got from, you know, sitting here with Nile Rodgers and we're both on the Daft Punk album, to if I try to connect the dots to how I got here, as I looked through it, I realized I had so much less to do with getting here than I thought I did. The fact is, I love writing words and music, and as long as I would show up with the love for that process, and kept my affection for the process and stayed sober, that that's how I wound up here. So trust you've got inside you what you need, and keep doing the things you love. Don't change what you love to do something different because you don't think the rest of the world. I'll reiterate what Nile said, you know, don't abandon who you are for what you think that the people will like. When we've only just begun, it was the number one record in the country. The *1 album in the country was In Agata de Vida. You couldn't get any further away from what looked professionally or what looked economically successful then we've only just begun. And yet I'm sitting here and he's telling me he played it and sang it.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm a lifelong fan of you guys' work, and with the Daft Punk album that came out last year, I was so inspired by it because when I listened to the whole thing through, I could just feel everything that was happening the entire time, you know. And I feel the same way about, you know, especially like Nile with all the work you've done in the past. And I was wondering, when you guys were making that record in the studio, you know, you talk about how, you know, you just love playing all the time, no matter what you're doing, if you're having success or not. And was that the kind of the attitude and the vibe that everybody had while making that record? Because I kind of felt like that to me, you know.
Yeah, I won't speak for everybody. I'll just speak for me and what was happening around me. We did my bits in New York City at Electric Lady, the studio where I cut my first hit single with Chic. And when I started to tell them the whole history of Greenwich Village and this is where I was, and before this was a studio, it was a nightclub where I played for $5 a night and all that sort of stuff, they were blown away because they had no idea. Then they asked me how we made Chic records, and I told them what we did, and then we started to recreate that process of deconstruction. And it became so much fun because their minds were open to learning. And it became so much fun to them. I finished one song, then they threw up another and said, do this again. And then they threw up another. I said, dudes, I gotta go to work. Believe it or not, I did everything in one day. One day. And we had the time of our lives, and I always make a joke. If I didn't have anything else to do, we'd still be making the album. We were having that much fun. I always say, make sure you have as much fun as possible because that might be it. You may never get on the charts, it may never come out, so have a good time. That's it.
That's awesome.
The only guys that I worked with basically was Chama and Gima. You know, they came, we sat down, talked about what the album might be about, who we were writing for. They played me 2 melodies, I wrote lyrics for them. They came back months later and said, would you sing the one, would you sing Touch? I sang that, they went away, they came back and played the album for me, and it was just all of a sudden, I'm on a record with Nile and Pharrell and these, and I actually met Nile at the Grammys and all. However, I have to mention this, having nothing to do with anything, but you'll appreciate this. If you go and if you look in the men's room at Electric Ladyland, and you look in the stalls, there's one stall that has a plaque, and it says, Paul Williams slept here. Comping vocals for Ishtar, which was I wrote the really bad songs for Ishtar, intentionally bad songs for comping vocals. I'd been up like 2 days and nights, and it was during my about 25-year chemistry experiment. I went into the bathroom, sat down, and passed out. Somebody put up a plaque, you know.
My kind of guy.
Rock and roll history. What can I tell you? Somebody else.
Thanks, man.
Welcome to Toronto. I have a quick question for Nile. I was hoping to find out a little bit or brief insight into your creative process with Bernard.
Basically it was, and this is just an overview, it was really different all the time, but Bernard, he was very straight-laced, wife, kids, the whole bit, very straight. Me, hippie, my parents are heroin addicts, party animals, the whole bit. I only sleep 2-3 hours a night. So consequently, I'm always up composing and writing and coming up with, most of the time, the initial ideas. So our whole relationship, when we weren't laughing and joking, which is 90% of the time, was, so my man, do you really dig that? And I would go, yeah, you know, I was always a little bit nervous because I respected him so much. And he would say, well, you know, I just wanted to know because before I write something for that bullshit, I want to see how attached to it you are. So he was always really critical, but it was so much fun. It was never to hurt my feelings. That's just how we were. As a matter of fact, I talk about it in my book. Madonna picked up on that part of our relationship. So right away, she started to imitate us. Every word out of our mouths were, you know, we were berating the person. We're like, damn, you wearing that again today? Now we know the track is gonna suck. you know, that kind of thing. But that was our relationship. It was always fun and playful.
Used to be called doing the dozens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We had so much respect for each other as musicians. I mean, I believe me, this is every single person I have ever worked with. You can't find, and I'm gonna just say this, not bragging, I'm just stating fact. You can't find people that I play with that suck. I only play with people who are amazing. My background's in Luther Vandross. I mean, that's like, that's who's my background singer, you know? So it's like, those are the people I work with. These are all the types of talented people that were in our universe. So it was total respect. It was whatever idea I would think of, he always thought it was amazing on some level, but usually it was way complicated because deep down inside I'm a jazz guy, so I'm always been, everything is complicated. I do not know how to write a simple song. I know how to write a complicated song and then take away, take away, take away, take away, and then finally I'm left with everybody dance, do-do-do-do, clap your hands. That ain't what I wrote at first. All right, come on.
And the greatest gift you can give a collaborator, I'm convinced, is to tell them quickly when it's awful. If you don't, if you don't love something, say it quickly. And I mean, because if you sit down with somebody that's going to spend 17 minutes being respectful with you about, well, that's really interesting, tell me you hate it right away. We can move on.
Oh, I told many people I hated stuff right away.
Yeah.
But sometimes stuff that you hate, you wind up massaging, and that's why I call myself a composer and an arranger, is because sometimes if you love it, you can convince me that I should love it too, and I may work out a couple of things that make me love it. I can't tell you how many times Duran Duran played something to me and loved it, and I'm sitting there going, you gotta be kidding me. Let's dance? What? That bad boy was a folk song. But at the end of the day, the Let's Dance that you hear, hopefully that you like, when Bowie first played it for me, I was sitting there going, uh-oh, he's playing a trick on me. But at the end of the day, it turned into this funky thing that was amazing. But that's not what he played when he walked into my bedroom and said, Nile, darling, listen to this. But I had an opening up, my mind was open to understand and respect Bowie. If he thought this was genius, there's something in there that I better look for. Because right now, I don't see it, but I'm sure it's there somewhere.
Well, we're going to do something that Nile doesn't know we're going to do right now, and it's. I just have to tell you that the amount of time that I've spent with you, that I would say that there is an elegance of kindness to who you are that is just, never mistake kindness for weakness, incidentally. There's an amazing strength of who you are that walks into a room with you. But you have that elegance of kindness and that part of something about being a listener that is I think, key to who you are today, you deserve every bit of success that you've ever had and all. And I get the feeling that I'm about to present you with something you weren't expecting to get. Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of Nile Rodgers Canadian Music Week. In honor of Nile Rodgers, Canadian Music Week announces its first annual Global Creators Award. This award was created to celebrate Nile's phenomenal career in the music business and the influence that he has had on billions, I'll say that again, billions of people. Here to present the award is the president of Canadian Music Week. Please welcome Neil Dixon. Come on out, Neil.
I just want to say a few words. Thank you, Paul. Hang on. Niall, we're here to present you with a special award today. To make the occasion more special, we have another surprise. Moving forward, this award will be named after you, the Nile Rodgers Global Creators Award. So Nile, each year our future winners will be selected by our creative committee and Nile's creative team, reflecting the standards of musical genius and humanitarian fortitude that Nile Rodgers stands for. Nile, I have to say this is one of the most absolute highlight of my career, standing here with you today presenting this award. Thanks for being with us and thanks for being our friend.
Thank you. So this is so weird because I've had a lot of number one records, or if they weren't number one, they were number two. Matter of fact, let me just give up some love for Canada. I'm gonna send you, just so you know that I'm not I'm not lying. Years ago, when I wrote this song called Le Freak. No, this is a true story. I got the most ridiculous looking statue from some organization in Canada. It's still in my house. It stands about this high.
Wait a minute.
No, I swear to God. Oh, yeah. Yes, maybe it came from Paul Williams. No, it's about this high, and it says, to Nile Rodgers, blah, 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 or something like this, for the song Le Freak. At this point in time, it was the largest selling single in Canadian music history. And it's like this big thing. And I said, how could that be? And I looked at the number on the charts that we had sold. And I think that at that time, Canada had 20 million people. And I said, am I right? Somewhere like that, 20 million people in the whole country. And this statue had given the number. And I'm going to post it when I get home. And you'll see I'm telling the truth. And I said, that seems ridiculous. So you're telling me that 1 out of every so-and-so people in Canada are going, freak out? Do-do-do-do-do. And it's like silly. So this year when we were at the Grammys, I kept saying to Daft Punk, because you could see, I was sitting next to Pharrell, and I was sitting behind the guys, and I kept saying, we're not going to win this. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, I've never won a Grammy before. I says, me and award shows, we just don't get along. I have awards, but nothing like big stuff like Oscars and stuff like that. So this is incredible to me, and I'm going to post this statue, this award, with my other Canadian thing that you guys are gonna crack up when you see this thing standing that high and you read the largest selling single in Canadian music history. I guess it was back in 1978 or something. But anyway, thank you very much, everybody. This is awesome.